But you cannot drop the shield because the arrows of inadequacy are constantly flying at you.
But the reality of human biology is that you have to drop the shield eventually, right? The human body and mind simply cannot sustain that level of constant hypervigilant performance.
They cannot. It leads to collapse.
Which brings us to a terrifying question. What happens when the student finally stops moving? What happens when the music turns off and the shield slips?
That is where the real fear lives. The greatest fear is not in the work itself, but in the cessation of work.
Exactly. And Gojo knows this. He poses his next challenge. He looks at you in that stark white room with the clock ticking in the background and asks, when was the last time you sat alone without distraction?
Such a simple question, but so terrifying.
And he is very specific here. He means no music, no podcasts, no reels, no lo-fi beats to study to playing in the background, no pretending to read, just you, sitting in silence, alone with your own brain.
For a student whose entire identity is conditioned by conditional value, that silence is agonizing. It is almost physically painful.
Why is it so painful, though?
We need to look at why that is. There is a misconception that humans avoid effort. We don't. Humans climb Everest. We run ultramarathons. We spend 10 years in medical school. We are built for immense, staggering effort.
So what are we avoiding?
What we naturally avoid is emotional danger. And for the modern student, rest has become emotionally dangerous.
I really need you to unpack that. Why does rest feel illegal? Why does taking a nap on a Sunday afternoon feel like a literal threat to my survival?
Let's look at the mechanics of the brain at rest. When you are engaged in a task, even a fake productivity task, like color coding a calendar, your brain's executive function is occupied.
It has a job to do.
Right. But the moment you stop moving, the moment you put down the shield, your brain switches to the default mode network.
The default mode network.
Yes. This is the network active when we daydream or let our minds wander. For a healthy mind, this is where creativity happens. But for a mind operating under conditional value, the silence acts like a vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. And it immediately fills with your deepest, most repressed anxieties.
The attacking thoughts.
Yes. The inner prosecutor from your courtroom analogy takes the floor. Am I behind? Look at what everyone else achieved today. Am I wasting my life? Am I fundamentally not enough?
It just floods in.
When you are busy, you can drown those voices out with the noise of action. When you rest, you are forced to listen to them. Therefore, rest isn't rejuvenating at all. It's a terrifying confrontation with your own self-doubt.
You avoid rest not because you are a hard worker, but because you are afraid of the thoughts waiting for you in the quiet.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, because this fear of silence and emotional danger perfectly explains the paradox of procrastination.
How so?
We always tell ourselves we procrastinate because we are lazy, or we lack time management skills, or we just don't want to do the boring work. But if we look at the psychology here, it completely flips our understanding. You don't fear studying, you fear the discovery.
The discovery of what?
The discovery of your own limits. You fear putting in 100% of your effort, trying your absolute hardest, staying up all night reading the material, and still failing.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Because if you try your hardest and fail, what is the excuse?
There is none. It becomes a direct indictment of your inherent intelligence or worth. Let's look at the emotional regulation mechanism of procrastination. If you have an exam on Friday and you procrastinate until Thursday night, study for 3 hours, and then get a C-. Your ego is protected.
Right, because I can just say, I didn't try.
Yes. You can tell yourself, well, I got a C-, but I only studied for 3 hours. If I'd actually tried, if I'd studied all week, I would have gotten an A. The potential of the A remains intact in your mind.
Oh, wow. It's a defense mechanism.
Completely. It keeps the fantasy alive. But if you study for 10 days, give it your absolute all. Hire a tutor, cancel your social plans, and still get a C-.
That would destroy me.
That is devastating. That attacks the core of your conditional worth. It says your best is not good enough. So your brain, in a deeply twisted way, protects you from that emotional devastation by making you procrastinate.
Delay feels safer than disappointment.
Procrastination is not a time management problem. It is an emotional regulation problem. You are managing your fear of inadequacy by ensuring you never truly test your limits.
Which brings us back to overthinking as armor. You sit at your desk, and instead of reading the chapter, you spend 3 hours worrying about your future career.
Doing the mental gymnastics.
Yeah. You map out 10 different paths, you stress about the changing job market, you worry about AI taking your future job, you feel completely exhausted afterward, you feel like you've been working because your brain was so active.
But you haven't produced anything.
Nothing at all. Overthinking occupies your working memory so your brain can't process the immediate fear of failure. It keeps your brain busy so you don't have to sit in the terrifying silence. But it keeps your ego emotionally untouched. You remain safe and completely, utterly frozen in place.
And we absolutely cannot ignore the environment in which all this internal wrestling is happening. We are not isolated variables.
We live in a society, as they say.
We do. And the culture we live in exacerbates this to an unprecedented degree. Social media acts as the greatest magician of our time. It is a constant bombardment of curated illusions.
The illusions are everywhere. You open your phone to take a quote-unquote 5-minute break from studying, and everyone looks incredibly successful.
Everyone is winning.
Right. Your cousin just posted about a promotion. That one intimidatingly smart kid in your class just published a research paper. Your friend is posting a picture from a perfectly lit cafe looking put together and happy.
Or exhibits for the courtroom.
Exactly. Every single post is a new piece of evidence entered into the courtroom against you. And here's the trick. Nobody, literally nobody, uploads a post that says, "Today, I questioned my existence for 4 hours while staring at a blank wall and crying because I don't understand my statistics homework."
And this creates an isolating pressure that is hard to overstate. It's what psychologists call comparative suffering, but inverted.
Inverted how?
You are comparing your messy, anxious, silent, behind-the-scenes reality with everyone else's highly curated, filtered highlight reel. You logically know it's filtered, but your nervous system still responds to it as reality.
It feels real to the body.
It does. It exacerbates the feeling that you are the only one struggling, which in turn reinforces the false diagnosis that you are just uniquely broken or uniquely lazy.
Thinking about this isolation really brings to mind some powerful parallels in storytelling, particularly in anime, which really nails this specific type of loneliness.
Anime handles this theme so well.
It really does. Think about Naruto. Everyone remembers the loud, obnoxious kid who declared he was going to be Hokage, but people often forget the crushing, profound loneliness of his childhood.
The swing scene.
Yes, those scenes of him just sitting alone on the swing, watching the other kids get picked up by their parents, and entirely isolated from the village. Or think about a movie like A Silent Voice.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
The core pain in that story wasn't just about literal hearing loss. It was about the deafening silence of being surrounded by a massive crowd of peers in a high school hallway and feeling entirely misunderstood, disconnected, and unable to bridge the gap to another human being.
Those stories resonate so deeply across cultures because they capture a universal modern burden. The student today is hyper-connected to thousands of people digitally.
They can text anyone, anywhere.
They can message someone across the globe in a second, yet they sit in their dorm room feeling entirely unseen. They are surrounded by peers in massive lecture halls, yet they are fighting an invisible internal war completely alone.
And when you are fighting an invisible war entirely alone, it is only a matter of time before the enemy changes shape. If society and social media are the external pressures, the things demanding your performance, eventually the student internalizes all of it.
They become the pressure.
They absorb the conditional value, the fear of failure, the impossible standards, they swallow it whole. And that leads to the most painful realization of the entire therapy session.
The realization that the call is coming from inside the house.
Gojo gets up from his chair. He stretches, walks slowly over to a full-length mirror leaning against the white wall. He points directly at your reflection, looks at you, and calls it the enemy.
That is heavy.
It reminds me of the philosophy in Vinland Saga, where Thor tells Thorfinn, "You have no enemies." Because the real battle, half the warfare you engage in every day, isn't fought against external forces or a harsh society or an unfair exam board.
The most brutal battles are fought against yourself.
Exactly.
We have to examine the profound cruelty of the inner critic. It is staggering how vicious we allow our internal monologue to be.
We are so mean to ourselves.
Think back to the words the student used in their prepared speech when they first sat down in the room. I'm lazy. I'm stupid. I waste everything I'm given. I want to ask the listener directly right now. Would you ever look your best friend in the eye and say those things to them?
Oh, God, never.
If a friend came to you, crying, exhausted, struggling to study for a test they are terrified of failing, would you look at them and say, you know what your problem is? You're a lazy failure who ruins every opportunity you get?
Never. I would be horrified if I heard someone say that to a friend. I would offer them water. I would tell them to take a nap. I would tell them they are doing their absolute best and that one test doesn't define their life. I would show them endless grace.
Exactly. Yet we subject ourselves to a level of verbal and emotional abuse every single hour of the day that we would consider abhorrent, even abusive, if directed at anyone else.
We wouldn't tolerate it from a stranger.
Not for a second. Silencing this cruel inner critic is not just a nice self-care idea. It is absolutely vital for long-term emotional health and physical longevity.
It's a survival tactic.
Yes. You simply cannot thrive in an environment where you are constantly being attacked, especially when the attacker is your own mind. It triggers that allostatic load we discussed earlier.
So how does the self-betrayal actually work on a mechanical level? It's so weird that we are crueler to ourselves than our worst enemies.
It comes down to identity.
Right, the neurology of identity. I'm thinking about the concepts from Atomic Habits here. It's about identity alignment. Our brains love consistency. They absolutely crave it.
They need it to function.
If your deeply held identity, fueled by that inner critic for years, is I am a lazy person who never finishes things, your brain will actually obey that identity to maintain consistency.
Yes. Let's look at the mechanism of cognitive dissonance avoidance. Cognitive dissonance is the psychological stress experienced by someone who holds two or more contradictory beliefs or values.
And the brain hates that stress.
The brain hates this stress. It wants internal alignment at almost any cost. It wants your actions in the physical world to perfectly align with your beliefs in your internal world.
So it forces a match.
Exactly. So if you set an alarm for 5 a.m. to study, But your core subconscious belief is, I am a procrastinator who always fails. Waking up at 5 a.m. and succeeding would create massive cognitive dissonance. It violates your self-image.
So my brain actually fights my conscious desire to succeed just to prove itself right.
In a sense, yes. Your brain will rationalize hitting the snooze button. It will say, you need sleep for memory retention anyway, or you study better at night.
It gives you logical sounding excuses.
It sounds entirely paradoxical,
Mhm.
but your brain will sabotage your conscious success to prove that your subconscious negative self-image is correct. It is a painful, relentless drive for consistency. If you believe you are a failure, your brain will orchestrate failures so the world makes sense to you.
It's the ultimate cell phone. You are literally rigging the game against yourself. Which brings us to the hard truth of the session.
Gojo's diagnosis.
Yeah. Gojo walks back from the mirror, he sits back down, leans in, and reveals the real problem. It is not a lack of talent. You are smart enough. It is not a lack of discipline. You can work hard when you are safe.
So what is it?
The root of all this exhaustion, this paralysis, this endless cycle of planning and failing is a complete and utter lack of self-trust.
Lack of self-trust is the true engine of burnout. Let's unpack the mechanics of this cycle. Think of self-trust like a psychological credit score.
A credit score, I like that.
You make a promise to yourself on Monday. I will study for 3 hours tonight. Then, driven by that fear of failure we discussed, or the need for emotional safety, you break the promise. You scroll on your phone for 3 hours instead.
I default on the loan.
Exactly. You just defaulted on a loan to yourself. Your credit score drops. The next day, you feel guilty, so you make another promise. I will definitely do it today. I'll do 6 hours to make up for yesterday.
Which is an even bigger loan.
And you break it again. Another default. Promise, break. Promise, break.
What happens when you do that over and over and over for months or even years?
Eventually, your own brain stops believing you. If a friend promised to pick you up from the airport 5 times in a row and never showed up once the 6th time they promised, you wouldn't believe them.
I wouldn't even ask them anymore.
You wouldn't even be mad. You would just quietly make other plans. You would book a cab. Your brain does the exact same thing.
Yeah.
When you say, I'm going to work hard tomorrow, your brain looks at the historical data, sees a credit score of 0, and says, no, you're not. I have the data. You are going to panic, order takeout, and watch YouTube. So I'm not even going to give you the dopamine or energy to try.
The trust is just gone.
The trust is broken. And nobody talks about the unique, agonizing pain of looking in the mirror and knowing your word means absolutely nothing to your own mind.
That is heavy. But it's so true. The credit score analogy makes perfect sense. So what does this all mean for the student in the chair? How do we break a cycle of self-betrayal?
It takes a radical shift.
Because society is not going to stop. The world is constantly standing over us, tapping its watch, demanding we fake being okay, demanding we stay usable, demanding we produce output for the economy. How do you rebuild trust with yourself when the world refuses to let you pause?
To escape this trap, the student has to make a radical choice. They have to fundamentally reject the modern operating system.
Reject optimization.
Yes. They have to abandon the modern obsession with constant optimization. The idea that you are a machine that just needs a better software update and turn instead to ancient Stoic wisdom.
Okay, let's unpack this philosophical shift, because this is where the therapy session pivots from diagnosing the pain to actually healing it. And I want to be careful here because Stoicism is kind of a buzzword right now.
It really is.
Every tech bro on Twitter is quoting it. But what does it actually mean in practice for a burned out student?
Modern life says optimize everything. It treats humans like algorithms. If you are failing, you just need a better code, a tighter schedule, a more optimized morning routine. But ancient wisdom, true Stoicism, said something entirely different.
What does it say?
It says, understand your nature first. Look at Marcus Aurelius. This is a man who ruled the Roman Empire. He was arguably the most powerful human being on the planet during his lifetime. He could command armies with a whisper.
The ultimate boss.
Yet if you read his private journals, what we now call meditations, they are not filled with arrogant decrees. They are filled with him doubting himself. They are filled with him coaching himself through extreme anxiety, reminding himself not to be petty, reminding himself that he will die one day and his legacy won't matter.
It is wild to think that even the Emperor of Rome had imposter syndrome. It really puts my anxiety about sending an email into perspective.
Exactly. Because anxiety and doubt are part of the human condition. They're not bugs in the system, they are features. We also see this in Buddhism. Pain exists. It is an inevitable part of being a biological creature in a chaotic world.
But suffering is a choice.
Suffering is different. Suffering begins when we fight reality. When we demand that we should be perfect, we fight reality. When we demand that we should never feel tired or that learning should always be easy, we fight reality.
So it's the attachment.
Yes, the attachment to a perfect outcome, the attachment to the A, or the flawless execution of the 57-step routine is the root of the suffering.
So how does Gojo translate all of this heavy ancient philosophy into something a 20-year-old student can actually use?
It brings it down to earth.
He does. He leans in and he delivers this one perfect, piercing line. He says, stop acting like life is an exam. It's training.
That is the ultimate paradigm shift. That completely recalibrates the amygdala's threat response.
Let's explore the mechanics of that shift. Think about the massive difference between an exam and training. An exam mindset is entirely about fear. It is binary. You pass or you fail.
There's no middle ground.
Right. If life is an exam, every single day is a test of your worth. Every mistake, every bad essay, every awkward social interaction is a permanent deduction from your final grade as a human being.
Which breeds that paralysis we talked about.
It breeds paralysis because you are terrified of putting down the wrong answer on the Scantron. You'd rather leave it blank, procrastinate, than guess wrong. But a training mindset. Think about athletes in training.
They fall all the time.
In training, you're supposed to mess up. You're supposed to try a new technique, fall flat on your face, figure out why your balance was off, and try again. Training accepts human effort as messy and imperfect. It prioritizes forward movement and learning over absolute, flawless certainty.
This completely disarms the trap of waiting to feel ready. Students sit at their desks, staring at a blank Word document, waiting for the perfect wave of motivation and clarity to hit them before they start writing.
That wave never comes.
But nobody feels ready. Action precedes confidence, not the other way around. Let me explain the neurology of this. When you take action, even imperfect action, your brain registers movement.
And it rewards it.
It releases small amounts of dopamine as a reward for the effort, which then fuels further motivation. Life doesn't reward the person who sat still until they were certain. It rewards the person who moved despite their paralyzing uncertainty.
Yes, you want to be a writer. Write a terrible, embarrassing paragraph. Just get it out. You are in training. You are not taking the final exam of your life.
Every essay is a rep at the gym.
Exactly, not a referendum on your soul. But then we reach what I think is the emotional climax of the session. The room gets very quiet again. The ticking clock seems louder.
The big question.
Gojo lowers his voice, stripping away any of that earlier playfulness, creating this incredible, quiet intimacy. He looks at you and asks the final, most important question. If nobody was watching, who would you become?
That is a staggering question.
Not who your parents want you to be, not who your social media followers expect you to be, not the hyper-productive version of yourself you think modern society demands. If all the external judges vanished from the courtroom, who are you?
And the realization that arises here is deeply profound. When you strip away the audience, you realize something shocking. The student doesn't actually want a perfect life.
They really don't.
They don't actually want to be a machine. They don't really want the 57-step routine to work because that sounds exhausting. What they truly want, at the absolute vulnerable core of their being, is permission.
Permission for what? What are they asking for?
Permission to breathe. Permission to fail and still be loved. Permission to just exist in the world without having to constantly, desperately prove they have the right to take up space.
They just want to be human.
They want permission to be human. And realizing this changes the entire definition of what healing actually is. Healing is not about fixing your discipline so you can finally be a perfect, frictionless productivity machine for capitalism.
No, it's not about becoming better at working.
Healing is the process of becoming less cruel to your own efforts. It is dropping the whip you've been using on your own back.
Becoming less cruel to your own efforts, that is something you carry with you. Because what if we introduce a twist to the scenario? What if, right now, as you're sitting in the chair realizing all of this, the door to the therapy room opens again?
Who is it this time?
It's not another therapist. Your future self walks in. The version of you from 10 years in the future.
That is a terrifying thought for most people. We always assume our future selves will be judging us harshly. We assume they will walk in, look at our messy room and our unfinished assignments and say, "Why didn't you study harder? Why didn't you invest earlier? Why did you waste so much time being anxious?"
But the twist is, they wouldn't be disappointed. If your future self truly survived all of this, they wouldn't walk in with a great book.
They wouldn't.
They would walk over, sit beside you in that sterile white room, put an arm around your shoulder, look at how exhausted you are, and say, "You survived things I thought would destroy us."
It is a moment of radical self-compassion. Recognizing the sheer weight of what you have been carrying. You haven't been lazy.
You've been carrying a mountain.
You've been carrying an invisible mountain of pressure, and you are still here, still trying to figure it out. That deserves respect, not condemnation.
So the session is ending, the hour is up, you stand up from the chair, you feel lighter, but you're also terrified because you have to walk back out into the real world.
The world is still out there.
So you ask Gojo the practical question. What do I do now? How do I fix the credit score? And I love this because after all this deep philosophy, after Marcus Aurelius and cognitive dissonance, his prescription is remarkably beautifully simple.
What does he say?
He stands up, he puts his blindfold back on, returning to his usual self. He smiles, and he says, "Nothing dramatic. Tonight, sleep. Tomorrow, keep one promise, a small one. Don't become your own villain."
It's the perfect Stoic instruction. Rebuilding self-trust must start with the smallest possible unit of action. You don't rebuild a bankrupt credit score by taking out $1 million loan.
You just default again.
Right. You take out a $10 loan and pay it back.
Yeah.
Don't promise to study for 10 hours tomorrow. Promise to read one single page of the textbook.
Just one page.
Read the page and then close the book. You are teaching your brain that your word actually means something again. You are proving that you are safe to trust. And you start by sleeping.
Without the guilt.
You start by giving your physical and emotional body the grace of rest without the agonizing guilt. Sleep is a biological necessity, not a reward for good behavior.
Don't become your own villain. It's so powerful. You laugh, but something in the room feels completely different than when you walked in. You don't feel fixed because you finally realize you weren't broken in the first place.
You were just playing by the wrong rules.
You were just operating under a brutal set of rules, but you feel understood. And weirdly, deeply, that feels so much better than being given a new scheduling app or a life hack.
This raises an important question, one that Gojo leaves hanging in the air as you walk out the door. If he really was your therapist, he wouldn't end by asking how to make you stronger or more resilient so you could survive the harshness of the modern world.
What would he ask?
He would ask one final thing to ponder. Why do you think you needed permission to rest in the first place?
Where did that belief come from? Who planted the idea in your head so deep in your childhood that your worth is mathematically tied to your exhaustion? It is something to seriously mull over as you go about your week.
It really is.
So, I will leave you with this final thought. Imagine that stark white room again. You are in the chair, the clock is ticking, the door opens. If Gojo Satoru looked at your life for just 10 seconds, what do you think he'd notice first?
What is your actual truth?
What is the one thing you've been pretending is laziness that is actually something much, much deeper? Think about it. And if this session felt like a conversation you actually needed, make sure you subscribe to our deep dives.
We dive into this kind of stuff all the time.
Not because we are going to offer you hollow motivation to grind harder, but because we are searching for genuine understanding of how to live well. Take care of yourselves. See you next time.